There are three major news stories about Elon Musk and also about the auto industry that are important to review. First, Elon Musk just won the votes needed from residents of South Texas to establish Starbase as an official city. This makes it just a bit easier to set the pace of its own development in the area for zoning of building projects and building homes for its 260 SpaceX employees. Second, BMW has stopped production of several of its vehicles, like the i7, i5, i4, and iX, all of which are produced in European factories at least until May. This is likely due to the possible US import tariffs. Tesla Q is saying sales in Europe has fallen. Is this true? A new article from Automotive News is saying the recent Trump tariff relief is still not enough to end supply chain and pricing worries by automakers. Third, the US House voted to bar California's plan to end the sale of gasoline vehicles by 2035. And finally, we'll take a look at the accomplishments Tesla made in April. It's a lot. We've got Jeff Lutz here with us. Perfect person to answer these questions about what's going on in the world order and the automotive industry. Jeff is a multi-decade supply chain executive, chief quality officer, and now CEO of his own supply chain consulting firm. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. So first, Starbase. This is a city. Elon plans things ahead of time, and it seems to have won this one. Elon Musk wins the vote to establish his city in Starbase, Texas. You got Elon, this is his new name on X right now for now time being. He said Starbase, Texas is now a real city. What happened is voters in South Texas and a decisive victory by a margin of 212-6, basically everybody, residents of the far-flung community surrounding SpaceX rocket launch site and headquarters, they voted resoundingly in favor of the incorporation effort. So what this does do is they give kind of more control for the mayor of the city and the committee of the city to decide the building permits and so forth. And the voters also approved the city's first elected officials, all three of which are current or former SpaceX employees. So virtually all of the inhabitants within, it's only a small place here, 1.45 square mile territory are Musk employees. So it's not really a big deal, but I think it's just gives them doesn't give them a free pass, but it'll give the company unique authority to set the pace of its own development in the area. What do you think about that, Jeff?
Yeah, Elon has this history of just looking at what gates critical path, what creates the critical path on a program, and how do you eliminate it. If it's incorporating your own city, and if that's needed, I'm sure that was presented as something that could gate a schedule. And he said, well, let's just go do it. So just don't bet against Elon. Don't bet against his scale. Don't bet against when he's has his eyes set on something. He approaches the problem very uniquely.
Yeah. I wonder what kind of housing he might build there. Maybe just basic, but it could also be preparing for Mars. So here's the proposed city at SpaceX headquarters, just a small area, Starbase here in South Texas. You can see its relation to Austin, San Antonio, and Houston. Cool. They've reshaped Boca Chica. Now they're going to build housing. There's 260 SpaceX employees. But their partners and families make them 500, and there's additional 3,100 workers that commute to get there. So this is the mayor, the commissioner, and they're all previous SpaceX people. There you go. Any other final thoughts on that?
Well, probably current SpaceX people too. So they're probably just doing their job, and they're doing this too. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about what's happening to the auto industry. You've got several movements here. The first one is there's been news or Tesla Q saying that there's going to be some slowdown in sales for Tesla in Europe. Now, they were saying that obviously in the first quarter, and we kind of pointed out that most of that was because of the switchover from the old Model Y to the new Model Y. They shut down factories. But now it's all back up to scale at this point, and yet now that there's still people saying that there's going to be a reduction in sales, which could very well be. So let's take a look what we're hearing here. So number one, even companies like BMW and others, they're being affected by the Trump tariffs. And BMW apparently stopped production of the i7, the i5, the i4, and the iX, all of which are produced in European plants, at least until the end of May. The company has not officially announced why the production has been halted, but there's many indications that BMW is reacting to possible US import tariffs with this radical step. As the affected models roll off the production line exclusively in Europe, the group would be particularly vulnerable to new trade barriers. What have you been hearing from your sources, Jeff?
Well, we'll hit this and then I guess go back to the Tesla commentary. If you're making a product, outside of the US for auto, you essentially don't have a product line unless you start getting up into more of the supercar category, Lamborghini, Ferrari. I think those consumers will deal with the tariff and pay it. But when you start getting into these categories of building 35, cogs that are 35,000, remember the tariff is assessed on the wholesale value of the product coming over the border. So if these vehicles are $35,000, $40,000 in cogs, and you have to put a $25,000 tariff on it, you've obliterated all the hardware margins and then some. And then you're going to have people think of U.S. consumers, right? If I need parts for my car, well, they're going to be under a tariff. If they're coming out of Europe, they're going to be under some tariff as well. Everything's going to be more expensive unless not only do you set up final assembly in the US, but you actually have to set up all your part operations and get multiple tiers of supply chain. And that's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take years to do. And then most won't be successful. Just remember, if there are 50, if there's 50 different efforts of vehicles, which there are actually being assembled outside of the US that want access to the US consumer, and they want to move manufacturing, I honestly think 80 or 90% of those won't be successful in moving their production here because of the cost structure that would be involved in building here versus building in their home countries, especially the other Asian countries, for example. But I would say in Europe too, they're leveraging their large manufacturing base there, and then they're making money. They're making good money on exports to the U.S. And by the way, they have tariffs on our vehicles coming in. So yeah, if you're doing final assembly out of the U.S., to me, unless you're a supercar, you're in trouble.
We'll come back and talk about the impact of tariffs again for Tesla and other car companies. We'll come back to that, but let's pause for a second. So you've got there, people saying that car companies like BMW, they're having troubles, but Tesla Q keeps at it. They keep saying that Tesla's is reducing, their sales in Europe has fallen. So is there any truth to that? Let's take a look. This is Alex again. He said this: Tesla's vehicle sales is doing fine in Europe. The narrative pushed by the media using low sales data from April to make the case that Tesla's sales is collapsing in Europe isn't supported by facts, but fiction. April sales has indeed been weak, as has January, but that doesn't change the overall picture, as the first month of a quarter is always weak. Once the expected low-cost model is pushed out, the overall picture will change again in Tesla's favor once the low-cost model. But here's the graph he provided. Oh, go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, let me address this just head on. So first off, we actually don't know what's happening. There could be if you put the graph up, there could be multiple things happening in this image. So everybody talks about, oh, the Model Y is already ramped. It's already No, Tesla told you on the earnings call that they ceased building the older version by the middle portion of February, and they started full-on ramp of the new version in the middle of February. Okay, so this is April. So how many weeks between starting the factory in the second week of February and April 1st? You have 5 or 6 weeks. How many of those weeks are going to be in transit? Depends which European country it is. Mm-hmm. So this is the point. You have to look at these things country by country. You have to know the starting inventory level. And by the way, I'm not saying that there's not a problem, but now let's talk about the gross numbers. We're talking about, I looked at the numbers. We're talking about 7,800 units, I think, was the baseline in April of 2024, and we're at 3,900. Okay. So we have a 3,900 unit shortfall in April. I don't know the starting inventory levels of the Model Y. Did it reach every country in 6 weeks? I don't think so. From starting the line, when you start a manufacturing line, you're not at full speed. You're not at full speed for probably 4 to 6 weeks, if not longer. So I don't think the Model Y operation in Europe even reached their peak production until some point in April. Okay. And here's the way that month one production works for European countries. So just follow this logic for a bit. Berlin's producing cars. Okay. China is producing cars. What does China do? China does not focus on domestic in the beginning. They focus on Europe in the beginning. They build cars, they put them on a boat. When is that boat going to hit Europe? 3 weeks, something like that, three or so weeks. So most of the stuff that's coming for Europe in month 1 is in transit from China. And then in Germany, they're starting production. Where the immediate cars are going to be available are going to be right in that blast area around Germany. And then every country, it's going to depend on where are they in the logistics queue. Okay. It's not just how fast does the crow fly in terms of doing logistics. You have to figure out, do you have the rail available? When's the rail available? Is the trucking available? Are there other methods? Everything has to be scheduled. So I think April was the month that they did build up. April is a build up inventory month. They don't start April 1st with a bunch of inventory ready to sell. That's not how it works. So I believe they're building up inventory, and I believe the latter half of April, they should have been pretty healthy. Like I said, could there be an issue? Yes, but we're talking about 3,900 cars versus 7,800 cars as the baseline, and not knowing the starting inventory levels. So if you're a supply chain professional, if you're somebody that's doing real analysis, you would want to know the starting inventory levels before you say, I've got a sales problem. So I would want to break this down into Model 3, Model Y, and I'd want to know the starting inventory levels of both. Could that be 1,000 of the units could be a demand issue? Sure. But could the other 2,000 be is that they're moving product in the inventory? Probably. So we'll have to see what all this looks like when we get real data. But it looks like the first week, if you put the graph up, the first week of May looks very healthy. And it looks like it's following the same trend of prior quarters, where month 2, that light blue in the stacked bars, it just grows, larger and larger. So we'll have to see. Like I said, there could be an issue. I don't know. It's those set of countries, and we don't know the starting inventory levels. To think that Tesla was fully stocked on April 1st in every European country, I think is ludicrous. There's no way.
Yeah, this is great to hear from you, because that's exactly what you need. Just one step down, a little bit more nuance. What's actually going on? There may be truth to it, but there's lots of reasons why this could be. But the number one thing is, first month of the quarter, usually low. And then you take a look at the other things, like you said, Model 3, Model Y, so forth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's relatively low to the other 3 months, but the point is this is lower than the same April of 2024. If that same logistics pattern applies, if that same inventory pattern applies, what's unique? What I'm saying is there's two things probably going on. The primary thing is the new Model Y, which is 2/3 of their sales, 2 out of every 3 Teslas, probably even more. It's probably over 70%, is Model Y, and that thing is still getting fully stocked in every country. And the second thing is there's definitely people. Europe is very left leaning. There's definitely people that don't want to buy a Tesla anymore. There's no question about that. I don't think that it's all these numbers, and we're not talking about the difference between 100,000 units in sales and 50,000 units in sales. We're talking about 7,800 units in sales in April of 2024 and 3,900 units in sales for those reporting countries in April of 2025. So I'm not losing my mind on this right now. I want to see more data.
And okay. This is something you've been talking about for a while. It's basically an article here from Automotive News saying that the Trump tariff relief, right? He came back in and relieved a little bit of the supply chain, not enough to end supply chain and pricing worries, according to some of these automotive executives. So weeks of intense lobbying by the auto industry culminated in a tariff relief package from President Donald Trump that helps manufacturers, but it falls short of soothing many of the industry's fears, according to the executives and analysts. They still think it's not enough. So by offering partial reimbursement of parts tariffs for 2 years via 2 executive orders published April 29th, it will not resolve upcoming supply chain disruptions and will threaten new vehicle production, and vehicle prices will still rise significantly. It's taken a bad situation, making it slightly less so. This is Cox Automotive Chief Economist Jonathan Smoke. Certain U.S.-made vehicles with high domestic content, such as Honda Civic, Ford Explorer, they face tariff costs between $2,000 and $3,000. Meanwhile, for cars assembled abroad, some electric vehicles and full-size luxury SUVs face costs between $10,000 and $15,000. The estimates are improvements of thousands of dollars from previous forecasts, but they're still pretty substantial. Higher costs will decrease demand for new vehicles. Cox lowered its full-year sales to $15.6 million from $16.3 after Trump imposed a 25% tariff. And then you got automakers like Mercedes and Stellantis. They withdrew their financial guidance because of tariff uncertainty. General Motors adjusted its guidance, now forecasting $4 to $5 billion tariff impact. So significant. You've been warning about this for weeks. This is a little bit of news here. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah. Well, I wrote an article February 1st, and I wouldn't change a word of it. Blood in the streets if these tariffs get implemented. And there was, I think people took the announcement from the Commerce Department about this 2-year rebate program as, oh, this is the lifeline. Now for the component supply chain, everybody should be okay. The answer is no, everybody's not okay. Basically, if your USMCA content is over 85%, you're still paying the import tariff, but you're going to get reimbursed on the vehicle sale. And so you're going to have a cash issue because you're paying the higher cost for the transfer price of the component to get it over the border. So you're going to have more cash outflow for components than you did before, but you're going to be made whole, especially if you're a Tesla and you build vehicles very quickly from bringing components in. You have very light inventory, you have very short supply network, and you're very rapid at how vehicles are built. Remember, one Model Y every 33 seconds, coming out of the factory, you're going to be in great shape. So Tesla was already relatively in a good position without this quote unquote tariff relief. And now it's even put them in a better position based on their content. But man, for General Motors, Stellantis, a lot of these luxury vehicles, you looked at the numbers at a whole vehicle level, the 25% tariff. I mean, they're just going to stop importing. I think Audi held a bunch of product up at the border. They're going to wait. Is this a standoff, a back and forth between the EU and the US? And so you're going to see a lot of stuff stacking up in the border. You're going to see a lot of components and maybe even vehicles going into bonded warehouses, where this is a place where you can hold inventory and you pay a bond for some period of time. And then whatever the tariff is, so let's say the tariff gets cut from 25% to 10%. Well, then to pull it out of the bonded warehouse, you're going to pay the 10% tariff versus the 25% if you tried to clear it right away. So there's a big run right now on bonded warehouses in the US. So you're going to see that happening. But in general, the auto industry, this is to me, a death blow. And I think what you're seeing on TV is you are seeing a poker game playing out. And the poker game is if you're a US CEO, or if you're CEO anywhere, you can't put a panic signal out. You can't thrash or trash the administration saying, look, you're going to kill the US auto industry with what you're doing here. You're going to kill the patient before, they came in for an appendicitis and you're sawing them in half. And the US could have brought manufacturing back with more scheduled tariffs. And this was the attempt, by the way, what they're doing now with this rebate program. But a lot of them are still not going to make it. And I keep going back to these metrics. Of the 10 top selling EVs in the US, 4 of them are final assembled outside of the US. They're going to get obliterated. Ford Mach-E, Chevy Equinox EV, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, which I know they're starting up manufacturing in Georgia, but all those components are coming from abroad still. They're bringing tier 1 back. Tier 2, 3, 4, and 5 is still coming from abroad. And then the Chevy Blazer EV, I think, is up in there. There's multiple vehicles that are just going to get obliterated with the final assembly tariff alone. And then the companies, you're hearing some of the CEOs talk about it in the US, the Ford CEO, for example, say, hey, look, there's certain components where we have no intention of bringing that supply chain back here, whether it's fasteners, screw, other things. We just have no intention of bringing that back here. So I think the administration, this is where I think there's a missing piece relating to supply chain development and how these tariffs are applied. And I think it's causing some issues. I think what it's causing delays. So if you're a manufacturer and you think like they got it wrong, the Commerce Department got it wrong, well, what you're going to do is you're going to try to wait it out. You're going to tell them where you think you got it wrong, what they can do. But then you're not going to actually be investing on bringing that manufacturing back because you think that they're going to fold again because they've delayed tariffs, they've modified them, basically we saw peak tariff on April 2nd, and everything from there has been a back off of April 2nd. So if there's a waiting game that's being played. There's a game of I can't speak out against the administration, and there's also a waiting game. What you're not seeing is you're not people saying I'm going to bring this stuff back as quickly as possible. I'm going to, you're seeing what you're seeing right now is if a company has an existing product line where one of the 3 trims is made in the U.S., maybe they're bringing another trim in from Mexico, and they're like, if it's a truck assembly line, they're going to add a shift, and that's fine. You're not seeing new greenfield sites. You're not seeing brownfield sites. You're not seeing new CapEx flood in. By the way, all that CapEx is being tariffed as well. Elon talked about that on the call. Now we're waiting for this tax bill to come where CapEx can be expensed. So now you're going to have people waiting for that. What if that bill doesn't pass? Okay, so lots of uncertainty on trade, lots of issues. The auto industry is in trouble. They're not talking about it enough on network TV. I'm firmly convinced there's a game being played a bit at the CEO level, not wanting to look panicked, not wanting to talk out against the administration. Also, they're all ad sponsors for the networks, whether it's CNBC, Fox, print media, they're all ad sponsors, GM, Ford. So it's not in their interest to say that their customers who pay them ad dollars could potentially be going out of business. To me, this is so serious what's happening now. This should be the red chyron on the screen literally every day, but it's not for the reasons I think that I described. Yeah. Unless people think that this is just going to all get undone in a couple of weeks, this is a very serious problem right now for the auto industry. Europe, Western Europe, and the U.S., by the way, they're serious issues.
Yeah, it's ironic. So first of all, I'm glad that you've been getting out there explaining this every chance you can get for the last month or two. But ironic that Elon is the one, having shadow matches, trying to teach, he knows he's not the president, but he's trying to tell them this is tariff is terrible. He's saving the other automakers. He's the only one that has the voice, and he's actually out there doing that. This is the rest of the article. It says here, the tariff changes come after automakers and suppliers warned the Trump administration that the duties will lead to surging vehicle prices and widespread production stoppages. A coalition of trade groups representing automakers, suppliers, and dealers warned the White House in April 22nd letter that parts tariffs will lead to supplier bankruptcies, layoffs, and production stoppages. So once it gets going, it gets going.
The statements from the Commerce Department, even from the president, these are statements of people that just don't build anything. I think there's a statement from the Commerce Secretary that said a 10% tariff, nobody's even going to feel that. That is absolutely wrong. If your COGS are $40,000 and you've got a 10% tariff on final assembly, that's $4,000. If you have a 10% tariff on your input BOM, let's say your bill of materials in the low $30,000 range that's affected by tariffs, that's $3,000. These are big. If that one line item appeared in the unit economics, it says, wow, this is what I'm paying for fasteners. This is what I'm paying for consumables. This is what I'm paying for steel. This is what I'm paying for aluminum. And I have this tariff at the end that's $3,000. Are you kidding me? That's a huge impact. That's a huge, and this is my point. Tariffs aren't bad in isolation. You have to look at what's the other country doing to you in tariff and non-tariff barriers and what we should be doing ourselves. Having a 0% tariff does not serve us well when those other countries are either tariffing our inputs or they're putting on stipulations that just don't allow us to import product to their country. So it's very appropriate to have this debate. It's very appropriate to have these negotiations. All I'm saying is that the schedule of application of the tariffs and the tariff levels, I think, are very questionable. And it's not only going to be the GMs and Fords that are going to be in the headlines. You're going to start seeing tier 1, definitely tier 2s in the auto industry just go belly up because they're not going to have the demand. they're going to have issues. The final assembly demand's going to be lower, or it's going to be questionable, and they're just going to have issues of who's paying the tariff. And if there's this standoff going back and forth, maybe the auto OEMs will handle it for the first 30 days. But after that, there's uncertainty. If there's uncertainty, then they're not investing in CapEx. Then they're not rehiring people. Then they're not adding that line. And this is where the supply shocks come in. But I think if you're a tier 1 or 2 supplier, or tier 3 bank, you depend on bank financing as part of your operations, where you go to a bank and say, I need this amount of money for continuing operations. And the bank is going to look at it and say, well, you're producing this many widgets, and now you have there's this tariff on it. And what do your economics look like now? And they're going to look terrible. And then they're not going to get financing. So you may have a liquidity crisis that occurs inside of the supply base as well that gets them. It may not just be just a strict lowering of demand, and then I go bankrupt, and then an auto supplier goes out of business. They may not be able to get liquidity for ongoing operations going forward. And this is where this gets really stupid, because the administration says, I'm tariffing, I'm bringing all this money in, we're going to be rich and whatever. And then they're going to see this helicopter of money that's going to have to come in and just drop money on the GM, drop money on the supply base, drop money on all these different areas. And be like, well, what do we actually do? What do we actually solve? We created all this bad will. We damaged these companies. We damaged confidence. We damaged CapEx investment. And now we're going to just shower them with money, which is what happened with the farmers with the phase 1 trade deal in 2018. That's what I'm very wary of. If you do these very large tariffs and you don't have an understanding of how to phase them in so each level of the supply chain can stay functioning, you're going to cause breakage. And I know a lot of people on X, they're coming to me and saying, oh, you're crying. Oh, I'm just telling you, I haven't seen anybody step up to the microphone in the government that is talking to this level of detail in any long form conversation, any short form conversation. They just use the terms like, oh, we think supply is elastic. We don't think a 10% tariff's a big deal. Or maybe you only get $2 and you don't need as many pencils. Like, this is like socialist, communist commentary. This is not capitalism, I want to make a bunch of stuff commentary. So I'm very concerned if these tariffs stay on the way they are, and the destruction that's going to happen in the auto supply base, and the long-term effects of the lack of capital investment and confidence. It's a real thing.
Yeah, it's a real thing. Mic drop. Thank you so much for your passion and explaining it, articulating it so well. This is a really big deal. We need to continue out there. Like you said earlier, some of the automakers, they actually can't, they try to communicate, but they really can't. They've got to be careful what they say and how they say it. They don't want to get hit more. So people like you are the only ones, stepping up, voice strongly saying so. So this next segment here, I'm curious where you stand on this, whether or not you think this is good news or bad news. California had this kind of rule, a law that banned gas cars by 2035. But the U.S. House voted to bar it, to cancel that. So this is their plan. The U.S. House of Representatives voted to bar California's landmark plan to end the sale of gasoline-only vehicles by 2035. That has been adopted by 11 other states. So they repealed the waiver granted by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency under former President Joe Biden in December, allowing California to mandate at least 80% electric vehicles by 2035. Well, then they reversed that. Okay. So, in my mind, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think you needed to have a law to force automakers. I think that, market forces would have done it anyways. But this, reprieves these companies, the Alliance of Automotive Innovation. This is GM, Toyota, Volkswagen, Hyundai, had warned car companies could be forced to substantially reduce the number of overall vehicles for sale to inflate their proportion of electric vehicle sales, right? So there's ways to game it if they needed to. What's your position on that, Jeff? Yeah,
I'm with you, Herbert. I don't think people were buying Teslas in California and all over the place in 2022 because they thought that in 2035 there would be some mandate. And what Tesla is focused on is just building the best piece of transportation. at the lowest cost per mile. And that's going to win. So if you have the best feature value, the best experience for consumers, that's what's going to win. Consumers aren't going to necessarily care about the combustion type. The combustion type is being highly politicized as it is here. Also, this is in the House of Representatives. I believe they're going to have to get 60 votes to overturn something like this in the Senate. I'm not entirely sure, but if they do, there's no way they're getting 60 votes. You're not going to get any Democrats to go along with this in the Senate. So it's going to get stuck there. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure that they need that for it to go to the president's desk. So someone can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but regardless of that, I'm with you. Tesla's focused on lowest cost per mile, best feature value product. And where are they going to be even a couple of years from now? They're going to have these beautiful cyber cabs. You're going to have, next generation full self, you're going to have cars that drive themselves. People are going to be gravitating to those and to those features and the value that's associated with those features relative to, combustion type.
Exactly. It's advanced ADAS, safety, driving themselves. That's really the differentiator, not EV versus gas. That's fine. That doesn't matter to me which way that goes, honestly. But yeah, thank you, Jeff. I mean, clearly the government is making laws, removing laws, tariffs, all these things. And, again, the message is thank you. There's good news, good thing that Tesla developed their cars the way that they have. They're least affected by any of this so far. It's almost like they knew this might happen. But boy, what it's doing to the other automakers is much worse. And thank you for keeping us updated.
Yep. Thanks, Herbert. Yeah, just be aware of the kind of the topical nature of how the analysis is being done out there, what's being put in the media. There's a political tinge to a lot of things. If you just go a couple layers deeper, I think there's critical questions that can be asked and answered, whether it's sales in Europe, which 3,000, if Tesla does 400,000 cars this quarter or 450, it's not changing the trajectory of the company where it's going. Now, it can't go to 100, nor it is going to 100,000. That's not happening. Okay. And it is important for Tesla to ship a lot of vehicles. They need to create cash flow to fund these future businesses until they get off in their own trajectory from a software and services perspective. So vehicle shipments are important. But what my point is Tesla's making the move, adding the new lower cost vehicles, refreshing the Model Y, Elon back kind of, more out of the daily, Doge spotlight and more in his daily company spotlight. And the moves to autonomy, they're making a better product. They're reducing their cost. And the geopolitical landscape is going to be more difficult for everybody else to compete in the future versus Tesla. And it's not politically correct for whatever reason to talk about this short form or long form on TV. But it's absolutely true. I debate anybody on it any day of the week. I'm sure other people would too, and they could too. And I think that's what people need to be looking more forward to. It's not just a pure robotaxi future. It's not just everything's going to be solved by bots. There is a really good underlying business. Nobody's making an EV profitable and verifiably profitable as Tesla is today. They're going to expand that production. I'm fully convinced that they're focused on it. People that think that Elon's not focused on making cars, I think is ridiculous. If you look at the actions that they're doing with redesigning their approach to how a vehicle is made, expanding the vehicle lineup, they're very focused on it. The energy side of it as well. This is still going to be a company that's grounded in hardware manufacturing, because that's how you're going to get all this physical real world AI to scale. You're going to have to have something to put it on.
In between two growth waves. But Jeff, one day, Elon's going to create a city in Mars called Starbase. Tesla Q is going to say, hey, did you see that the Tesla vehicle sales have plummeted? And they won't take into account that it's on delivery. It takes 2 years to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when we're having that conversation, we'll all be, we'll all be in a different place. But yeah,
Thanks, Jeff.
There's nuance to all this. There's nuance to all this. Don't get your Tesla sales updates from Teen Vogue and Better Homes and Gardens. There's real analysis that should be done, and the analysts out there should be doing the real analysis as well too.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate you. Follow him on X, the Jeff Lutz. Bye all.
Thank you.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.